Today on the Terrible Warriors, we continue our journey through GenCon. And when you're at GenCon for the very first time, it can feel very overwhelming, and our recommendation is to go find a booth with all your friends at. Hang out at that booth. Loiter around that booth until they acknowledge your presence and sit down to talk to you for 20 or so minutes. That's exactly what happened at the Modiphious. Actually, that's not true. I did call ahead. They knew I was coming. They were very accommodating and were able to give me a lot of their time to talk about products that are not just Star Trek Adventures. Of course, that's all I want to talk about, but of course, Modiphious makes a lot more games like John Carter from Mars, the Fallout Wastelands game, and the newly announced Fallout tabletop, of course, Conan and Skyrim, and, well, we'll get into it. In the next hour, you're going to hear me chat with, first, Aaron Pollyea, who's a writer on Star Trek Adventures and was one of the consultants on our Night Witches game that we did. The Star Trek Adventures Alpha Quadrant book has just come out, and Aaron's got some content in there. Also, a bit of a spoiler alert warning. We get into Star Trek Discovery and our theories about Picard, because when two Trekkies meet in a hallway, that's just what's going to happen. We also get to sit down with Modiphious founder and CEO Chris Birch to talk about AchTung Cthulhu and Fallout and all of the wonderful, cool games that they're working on and their experience with the IPs that they've been working with and how it's been like working with CBS and Bethesda. And finally, on the last day of GenCon, we got to sit with Sam Webb, the director of RPG development at Modiphious, where we talk a little bit more about Star Trek Adventures, because this is Justin you're talking to, and as well as all of the other interesting games they're working on, and he gives us a pitch on John Carter from Mars if you're not already sold on that. That's what you can expect over the course of this next hour. So, once again, thank you to everyone at Modiphious for letting me drag these people away from your booth in the middle of GenCon to talk to them. And we start first with our good friend, Aaron Pollyea. Hey, Aaron Pollyea, you're a terrible warrior now.
I guess I am. I've always been pretty terrible.
So you're only here at GenCon for the one day.
Yeah.
How has it been for you?
It's been really busy. I haven't even been signed up for any games to play myself. It's just me been walking around the dealer room and talking to people and trying new games, really. But mainly hanging out the Modiphious booth.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, the Modiphious booth has been fun. It's been busy the whole time I've been here. I can't get my hands on an Alpha Quadrant book because it keeps selling out before I arrive. Yeah. Anything catch your eye here on the floor as you've been walking around? Or how's it been feeling for you?
It's been pretty good. I mean, I saw the new Fallout stuff that Modiphious has. I obviously picked that up right away. My wife loves Ticket to Ride, so I picked up the new Ticket to Ride London, which is like a little game. There was a little Borderlands card game that I saw that was like Tiny Tina's Tea Party. And, okay, I'm going to have to get that. That's adorable.
I'm seeing a lot of licensed board games this year. There's a Die Hard one. There's a Little Trouble in China, or Trouble in Little China one. And, and it's just it seems to be just a trend where the IP holders must be just like, all these other ones are doing so well, open up the floodgates.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of it does seem to be, just like movies or television, that if something's based on an IP, it's going to have an automatic locked-in audience.
Well, it used to be not that long ago that if it was a game that had an IP, it was a cheaper game.
Yes.
And that was certainly true with video games. It was certainly true with board games. Mm-hmm. Modiphious played a big part in breaking that trend.
Yeah, I do. I agree, because Star Trek really turned out very well. I don't have anything negative to say about the previous incarnations of the Star Trek game, like role-playing games.
I never got a chance to enjoy it myself, but one of my friends who's really into like a collection of old like vintage retro RPGs is that it was very unwieldy, mm-hmm. and it would overwhelm a player and GM.
I agree, like the Last Unicorn stuff,
which is similar to that whole era too of Cyberpunk and Shadowrun as well. Those were just overwhelming games.
I think out of all the previous Star Trek games, I think I like the FASA one the most, which is really old, and I'm sure there's people that listen that remember that very well. Actually, when FASA closed down, FASA was based out of Chicago, and when they went bust, they just tossed everything into dumpsters, and there were people that knew when they were throwing them into the dumpsters, so there were people that got out original artwork and things from all those original And I ended up getting like a few of those, including the original artwork of the Gorn inside the FASA.
That's so cool.
It's crazy. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just looking because we're standing right next to the Modiphious booth, and they got the Fallout IP, they've got the Elder Scrolls IP. Obviously, they got Star Trek. There's Thunderbirds, and it's
Conan.
just Modiphious is getting that reputation now of you can trust us with your product.
Yeah, and we're always going to put out a quality thing that people are really going to like. Good art. Good layout, good editing. Yeah, it's all there.
The Alpha Quadrant book is out, and that's the one I don't have yet. So I'm looking forward to getting in and chewing in and reading it. I know you've written some stuff in there. Do you want to give us a little tease?
Well, there's a couple Tholian ships. One you should recognize from the original series. It's the Tholian web spinner, but I have...
Tholians are almost entirely out of frame, though, right? Like, they make a couple of appearances, but they're very mysterious.
They're mentioned a lot in Deep Space Nine, but always to the side. They're you see them in one original series episode and one Enterprise episode.
Yeah.
So, but they're a fan
like the
favorite.
Breen. They're just this. They're one of those. They're on the edge of what we have, and they're really threatening, and they're usually mentioned in we don't want to get their attention.
Yeah, and it's like the Gorn as well. Like the fans love the Gorn, even though once again I think they've only appeared in 2 episodes total, but you want to flesh them out because they're clearly powerful in the universe, but they're just off to the side where the Federation is only just really dealing with them. Even by next gen, the Tholians are still pretty much unknown. So I decided to write another Tholian ship, a new unique Tholian ship that CBS
really cool.
approved.
And so, and it did get. Of course, it would have had to be.
Yeah, they had to look at it, and is it a Weaver? Instead of a web spinner, which is the smaller one, it's a Weaver. So it's a larger Tholian vessel that's more akin to the Ambassador class in size than the little tiny web spinners that Enterprise encountered in the original series. And I'm pretty sure I wrote one. Well, I know I wrote one that's Cardassian that's unique. I forget what I named it. It's a unique name. And I know I did a Ferengi vessel that is also a larger Ferengi vessel.
Oh, neat. There's there's besides the shuttlecraft and the big crescent ship, there's almost nothing. Yeah,
That's it.
Is that really? It's just the two.
It's just those two. So I built another one that's more of a long range cruiser. I want to say something more akin to the Galaxy.
Canonically, the Ferengi do deep space exploration.
Yeah.
They're like the Federation. They go out and reach other places, but then they go there and they immediately sell them all the technology, and that's how you got the Pakleds.
Yes,
that was Ferengi interference.
The species that has the lasers in the one episode of Next Gen, I can't believe I'm forgetting their name. It's been a long day. They had like a ship that had like mercurite missiles and lasers, and Picard was like, they can't do anything to us, and they're firing on us. Well, why is their freighter then used as a model for alien spaceships for the rest of Next Gen? Well, it's because the Ferengi are going down. They're going, hey, you guys don't have any technology. You just got warp speed.
Here, have this blueprint.
And we'll take all of your ships and sell them, and we'll give you something that's maybe 25 years ahead of what your tech is.
Of course they would.
And we're going to sell them to all the different merchants all over the place. So that's my explanation, at least, for why you end up seeing this model reused in a whole bunch of different episodes. But yeah, anyway, new Ferengi ship, new Tholian ship. I'm really excited about that one. I'd love to see a picture of it. I haven't seen it. But yeah. Anyway.
I'll text you once I get a hand on this book.
Yeah.
Elusive. I don't think it's real. I don't think they actually printed any. I think they're just telling me it's sold out.
I saw it this morning. I swear it's real.
Dear Jim Johnson, listen, buddy, do me a favor.
You wanted to talk about...
Yeah, I was saying, while we're here, I got you on the... you and I keep going back and forth on Facebook about Star Trek and Discovery, and I know, I'm excited about Picard, and...
I'm actually very excited for Picard.
Yeah.
I wasn't at first when they first announced it. I'm like, okay, wait a second. You're gonna do something with Picard? Man, the man's a saint. Don't ruin him.
Yeah, but at the same time, I was always like, Patrick Stewart is so selective with what he does that he wouldn't have come back here unless he had a story. And for him, one of his most beloved stories was the Descent with there are 4 lights, and.
Excellent.
And but also it's the reason why he's now working with Amnesty International and all the research that went into that episode. So he wouldn't come back to do something like Star Trek at a time of his life when he wants to be doing comedy unless there was some message he wanted and Patrick Stewart wanted to share.
I agree.
And that's the story that they've written.
I saw the little teaser that they had. Okay, there's the vineyard. Okay, they care about that piece. all right, now I'm getting a little bit of hope. And then I saw the full trailer that came out from Comic-Con.
Yeah.
And
the more I have sat with it, it has, like a fine wine, it has begun to just percolate and age, and it's just tasting more and more better every time I think about it.
Watching it the first time through, I honestly expected to see Data in it. So that wasn't the big surprise to me. The big surprise was actually 7 of 9. And I can't believe how excited I was for that.
In hindsight, is super obvious.
Yes.
He and 7 of 9 have such a shared understanding that, of course, like, 7 of 9 and Picard can talk about something no one else really has a life experience.
Yeah, well, them and, like, the board kids.
Like a handful of others, but even then, the board kids didn't make it home, right? They all got dropped off along the way eventually because they stopped wanting to have kids on the show.
And then Hugh.
Maybe. But what the hell, right? There seems to be a single frame of Hugh being worked on.
Yeah, taken apart.
And it's like, what? And here's the thing is, did we see Data?
I think we saw a hologram of Data.
I think we saw before. And my mind of it is also Patrick Stewart, 78, Brent Spiner's, he's getting on as well. And he didn't want to return to Data because of his concerns about being an older actor and all that. And I'm thinking the way they handled Carrie Fisher and the way they handled Han Solo and Harrison Ford and let them age, they've got an opportunity here with Data and B4. Picard could be visiting B4.
Yeah.
The way Patrick Stewart could be visiting a friend with dementia. And
it's very possible.
And it's Data. It looks like Data. It sounds like Data. It has all of Data's memories, but it's B4. And if, I know in the comics they found a way to, like, unlock his mind or whatever, but that's too easy. That's too it's too much of a fan servicey. I would have a lot of respect if they just, even if Geordi figures out the positonic brain and they are able to make more androids, I would be unsurprised if we see other androids around at this time.
To see that,
But B4, treating him as a character who could be like Data with Alzheimer's or dementia, where they're playing poker, it seems, but it's more like Go Fish, or it's Picard going there with compassion, seeing a friend, but his friend's not always really there.
Yeah,
that could be a really...
It
could be a sad, it could be a lovely scene, it could be handled with such... the kind of stories that Star Trek does.
Yes, I agree. But I think that one thing that is a clue in that, and you have to pause it right at the right moment when it's looking right at Data, you can see the collar of his uniform. And it's not the modern collar for Starfleet. It's actually the same uniform collar that you would see in Nemesis.
Exactly. And here's the thing is, if he is B4 with dementia, it could also just be a touchstones of things he remembers, of having an environment that is comfortable, which is, there's a whole movement right now with oasis villages for seniors suffering from dementia, where rather than putting them at home, you put them in a neighborhood that's just full of things that are there for them to remember, and they're with other neighbors that are also, and it's a whole community that's kind of built around that support. And let's extrapolate then 300 years and make what would be the utopian post-ableist form of dementia care look like in the 24th century.
A big holodeck where the computer constantly monitors you and provides everything you need. I know that might seem a little kind of 1984-ish, but in the end, a holodeck could easily take care of somebody with that kind of...
And Picard is exactly the kind of person who would be the kind of person who would visit his friend every week for a game of poker, just to be there for him. And that might be the scene where it's the last time he does that.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, and I'll say the thing that actually got a little tear in my eye during that trailer was the Captain Picard Day banner.
Yeah.
I was, oh, man.
Well, and that could be in the holodeck when he's visiting B4.
It could be, but then you think, man, if that's the real one, he took that out of the wreckage of the Enterprise D.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, I didn't even... Oh, no, my heart.
It's like, oh, my Lord, how did he... I mean, okay, he went down to the lower decks, the crunched lower decks.
Here's the other thing. There's a big mystery of Riker and Troy are going to be in it.
Yeah.
We know Riker's in command of the Titan at the last time we heard him.
Yeah.
What if he's being sent to stop Picard?
I think it's very possible.
Right? Like, he'll listen to you, and then Picard has to, number one, I can't do this.
Yeah, I have this mission.
I have to do this for them, and Riker has to... He owes it to his duty, and he has his orders, and that could be...
It could be. It very well could be the way it goes. I mean, we're going on very
if it's going on
right
my theory that if he's a humanitarian, Patrick Stewart, and he's doing this Amnesty. And if it's a story of a refugee crisis, if it's a story of talking to the U.S. right now and what they're going through, which would be pretty on the nose and I think very appropriate. And this is his adopted country, and Star Trek has always been a reflection of the state of the U.S. So I thought it would be about the Romulans. Sounds like it's about the Borg. I think Borg refugees are even more great of a twist, because the prejudice that they would have against liberated Borg as a community, and not just treating them like prisoners of war, which is kind of how they've been treated up until this point. When you free someone from the Borg, they're a Vulcan, or they're a Klingon, or they're a human. They're not Borg anymore. Borg, when liberated, are more like just people. They were prisoners of war during the time in the Hive. But what if they're keeping on like Hugh did? Or
like Picard, that he can still sense the collective.
And we know that the collective, when separated, can form mini collectives, and that might be the case of the entire remains of the collective, like a shattered mirror. If there's a Borg refugee crisis, the level of sympathy even from the Federation would be zip.
Yeah, no one would want Borg around just because they'd be afraid. Like, you can remove all the implants that the Borg have, just like they did with 7 of 9. But at least with 7 of 9, she still had nanoprobes.
But even adult Anakin Hansen is still going to look back and be like, I'm still somewhere Borg. Yeah. Just like Picard still somewhere is Locutus.
Yeah, those nanoprobes are still there. I mean, you have to
even just the effect on the mind. Like, even without all the technology, the experience is still there.
Of being completely subsumed by the whole. That you weren't a person, that you were just kind of a cell operating in. Yeah.
Which kind of makes me think, too, of like Odo and the Great Link and separating, and just like the withdrawal he even had, and having to ultimately return to that at the end. And it's sort of, there's a really strong story underneath this. And I have, for me, it's my absolute faith in Patrick Stewart, in that he wouldn't return this if it wasn't worth it.
No, and I agree. Yeah. I agree. I'm really looking forward to watching this. I like I said, at first, before the trailers, I was, I don't know. Yeah. But now I'm pretty sold on it.
And it creates such crunchy ideas, too, for back at Star Trek Adventures. Like, in the last year alone, now with Picard and with Discovery and with everything's going, like, there's so many... Your game from 2 years ago now is going to be so different today. If you want to set it in the 23rd century, you've got, like, even just with Pike and with that story, right? Like, amazing. You've got so much more to have than 3 seasons of the original series. As much as that was, you've got so many different angles you can approach it now in that era, and you've got and now with them going where we haven't gone before. Like, let's go 900 years. That's going
to be an experience. Yeah.
You know all about Andromeda. Do you think there's a chance the season 3 of Discovery could be trying to go for Gene Roddenberry's concept that became Andromeda? Discovery lands off in a future post-Federation, and they're now the beacon of hope, and they try to tell that story that Gene couldn't tell because at the time they wouldn't go for it, and so Andromeda ended up being the side act of that.
See, I don't know. I don't know. I am not fully versed in Andromeda. I know enough.
I would just love to see Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda story exist without Kevin Sorbo. So
sure, okay, that's fair.
And
that's fair.
In the same way that there's so many things in Discovery where they justify it by it was in the concept art, and we're going to make it look that way. I could see that being at least an inspiration. It could be, but I don't know.
I could easily see a 900 years in the future type situation where there might still be a Federation, but it's a shadow of its former self.
You heard about, did you see Calypso?
Yes, Calypso was great.
And you heard from the writer that the Vidraish is supposedly a bastardized name of the Federation.
Yeah.
That this people that this guy's running from are whatever the Federation is 900 years from now.
Yeah, and you don't know if they're you can theoretically say, okay, they're the bad guys, but who knows? We just have this like limited little peek into it. Now, I'm assuming that they are supposed to be the bad guys.
Or some kind of totalitarian or some kind of thing. They still have their Betty Boop, but they're subjugating worlds.
Mm-hmm. And I can see even the Glorious Federation falling to that at some point.
Let's bring the Federation to everybody.
Yeah, well, it's bring the Federation to everybody, but it's more of like we need to withstand whatever big force is coming at us from the outside, like be it the people from Andromeda, remember those guys from the original series, or a full-on Borg invasion of Federation space. Like
I don't
happen in the novels.
Yeah, I don't see it necessarily happening, but there's an opportunity because now Picard is happening between seasons 2 and 3 of Discovery in a weird way, right? Like, because Discovery's no longer a prequel.
Yeah.
And so I don't, it might just be Easter eggs, but there might be a connective tissue
I'm sure there
somewhere in where the effects of Picard will ripple all the way to where Discovery has landed.
I agree. I
hope so.
Yeah, I want them all connected. They should be connected. Like, yeah, the sinews of Star Trek should tie everything together. It doesn't matter when it is. Just because of, well, including time travel in it, come on, all these big connections through the eras happen.
Yeah, well, and it's just like, the shared Star Trek multiverse and all that. Aaron, I really enjoy shooting the breeze with you. This is so much fun.
Thanks.
Enjoy the rest of your time at GenCon. I want to hear more about like the stuff that you're writing and what you're doing. And well,
there's lots of things in the works for Modiphious that I've already finished writing.
Oh, cool. Quickly, just shoot me off. Lightning round. What are we looking forward to that you're allowed to tell me?
I'm allowed to tell you there's going to be another book that has lots of ships in it.
Ooh.
Lots of ships that people have been asking for. So that's all I should probably say.
Okay, all right. All right,
I don't want to get in trouble.
No, we won't get in trouble. I'll follow that up with Chris.
Right.
I won't tell you told me.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Aaron. Have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your Gen Con. And
thanks. Thanks.
Chris Birch, you're very welcome on the Terrible Warriors. It's nice to meet you.
Hey, thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
It's not your first time on the show, but it is our first time having a conversation.
Sure, yeah.
Long time ago, Mike Dodd got to talk to you about this new game you had just announced, the tabletop Fallout.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just it was coming out soon, and you were telling us how the miniatures are real great. I can't wait for you all to see the details. And then actually, just to the left of you, there they are playing it fully formed.
And it's in this beautiful sea, kind of devastated settlement and a big vault in the distance.
Yeah, like that Art Deco
cool.
bus design.
Adam Hreneke builds this for us, who does such a spectacular job. There's all these little details, like there's a ruined house, and in the attic there's a Mr. Handy box that he came in, and little dead skeletons on the sofas and things.
So it's safe to say it's been a great success since Fallout came out.
God, yeah. I mean, we had teething problems getting it all out, and it was obviously so much in demand, and it was our first big miniatures game. And but now we've got the new range coming. We've kind of managed to get through that first year, and the game has picked up a huge fan base, and we've just shown that we can create beautiful resin miniatures to support the line. The people are enjoying the gameplay. It's found its own home because it's not your typical tournament game. This is a game where you can play co-op together against the game. You can play narrative missions. You can play narrative competitive games.
Which for me makes sense for a company that had come from tabletop role-playing into miniatures, that it wouldn't be a tournament game, it would be a story game using tabletop miniatures as its vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, I always say we want to be the home of storytelling on the tabletop, and it's, whether we do role-playing or miniatures game, I want a story to unfold with my battle. I can't just win by killing stuff. So, and I think there's a lot of people out there, and I grew up playing solo games as a kid because there was no other gamers in my town in England, and I figured out how to play games, with AI rules and all sorts of stuff. And I think there's a lot of people out there who don't have the time to set up a 3-hour game with their buddies and, travel an hour to get to a session. That if you've got like an hour or two on your own because you've got kids, you've got family, you've got a job and a life, sometimes you just need to crack out a game for an hour or two and just get that fix. So I think that's what we try to do, is give you this really challenging
miniature
gameplay.
solitaire.
Yeah, kind of, basically, yeah. And the Elder Scrolls, the new game, is going to do the same thing. It's following them. It's like a son of Fallout in terms of the rule set. And obviously it's more about melee combat and magic, and stamina and magic is really important. But that also is a solo and co-op rule set. And where all the organised play we're doing is very driving towards kind of offering the people the chance to run these awesome events that tell a story that's part of the bigger picture as well.
So we love tabletop games, but The Terrible Warriors is an actual play RPG podcast. So we loved Star Trek Adventures. We ran through the whole first season of the Living Campaign.
Wow, great.
And some of our crew went through at the end, and some of our crew did not.
Oh, dear.
And it kind of left it almost like the end of Deep Space Nine with Cisco going off to be with the Prophets. It was a gripping experience, because Star Trek Adventures had such a great way of handling being in a combat environment where the combat doesn't have to be the answer. Science could be, diplomacy could be, and really letting each individual players play to their strengths. We had games where it was an all engineering crew one week, or it was all science because no one else showed up to the session. So the captain's up on the bridge, and they're all just in the lab working on that side of the problem that episode. And Fallout, you've announced there's going to be the RPG, using the same dice engine that Star Trek runs on.
So we've got two versions. So the first version that's out now takes that the miniatures game engine, which effectively is a D20, and it's coloured D12s that you use as effects. So a weapon that's good at range uses a green dice that's more accurate. A weapon that does lots of damage uses a black dice, and your weapon card just says, okay, I get a black and a green. So it's really easy. You roll your white skill dice to get under a target number. It's basically an RPG. Each stat card for each character has all the special stats that you're used to seeing. So the war game actually started off kind of as an RPG that was a miniatures game, and so we did the expansion that gave you everything else you needed to do to be able to play an RPG. You don't need miniatures. So
it'd be like Star Trek Adventures, where the miniatures and the zones and
in Fallout Wasteland Warfare,
was an option for you.
You would play it either as a tactical miniatures game, or you play it in the mind's eye. So you could use zones. The 2D20 version coming next year goes into a lot more detail about like skills and a bit more about the lore and campaigns, but it's going to share the same campaigns, so you can switch between the two. 2D20 is not geared towards being a miniatures game. It's like my own thing with you walk into a average gaming club, and if they're playing D&D, they're probably playing with a big square mat with drawing out the dungeon and the encounters, and people are using their miniatures, and maybe that was very heavy for 3.5. But even so now for 5th Ed, I constantly see people playing with white clean mats and all their WizKid pre-painted plastics and stuff. So it's I think it's interesting how we've kind of split it out, because I knew there was people who are really into the miniatures game who want to try an RPG, and there were people who would be, I'm not really into miniatures, I want just the straight RPG version. So
it's also just availability of resources too, right? For me growing up, 3.5, as you mentioned, it was the miniatures, it was the maps, it was even the paper craft, it was really getting into it. But then off to college and then off on my own, getting people together, it's just you have to keep it simple, or you're playing it online, you're doing it over just Discord, and you just having that ability to just tell that story and just track your own character with pencil and paper and not have to worry about visualizing it outside of our imagination.
Exactly, yeah. So, I think it's a bit like when I did AchTung Cthulhu. We picked up two rule systems, Call of Cthulhu and Savage Worlds. Savage Worlds, more pulp, more fun, two-fisted. Call of Cthulhu, more dangerous, more dark. So it appealed to two different audiences, and I think that's kind of what we've done with the Fallout RPG. And we were able to get this one out straight away because the system's there, and it was a pretty easy conversion to prepare it. And then we're taking time to get the 2D20 one ready for next year. So I'm really pleased how we've done that, and it also 2D20 is so versatile. You can re-engineer it from the base up. Effectively it's two 20-sided dice.
Yeah, and with Star Trek Adventures, I did enjoy the way it worked with combining the skills, the attributes, allowing the players to offer their solution to the GM rather than me saying, give me a dex check. They go, okay, I want to do blankety blank, and they would combine and create essentially each time their role for that solution for
John
me.
Carter is a kind of more simplification still, where you basically combine two attributes, and that's it. So you don't have, skills, you have talents. But so Deja Thoris might, use the force for her personality to beat down a guard trying to, stop her. Whereas John Carter uses his might and daring, So it's that flexibility of being able to, create your own route through the story.
Bringing it back to the Star Trek Adventures and the writing, I was just talking to Aaron Pollyea before I talked to you, and I got to hear about the Alpha Quadrant book that is out and keeps selling out here at GenCon. And there was you have original ships that have made their way into this book with CBS's approval, and that was kind of neat. They're hearing that they got to propose this new ship, and CBS signing off on that. And how has with CBS, with Star Trek, with Bethesda, with Fallout, what's it like working? Because
very good. I mean, I think
versus making an independent IP and working into someone else. What's those relationships been like?
Well, I mean, it always starts off difficult because they don't know. They obviously trust you to sign a deal, but until you prove that you can look after their baby, they keep a close eye on you. And as you get on, then they start to be more flexible. One thing about CBS is they really embrace partners creating content. Star Trek's very much been built on comic books and novels and video games and RPGs, adding to the storyline.
Even so recently, seeing the trailer for Picard, and there's it seems to me as a fan, some bleed over from Star Trek Online's uniform aesthetic, kind of making their way into that. And so it's not that either is considered canon, but that there's this, it's almost like a farm to work these ideas and let the very best ones rise to the top, and then they get incorporated.
For the RPG, we created the Shackleton Expanse, which is this big aerospace where it's our campaign
feels so
area.
Logically appropriate, Of course it would be there. And of course, when you look at the actual maps and see where Klingon and Romulan Federation space, no one would go explore there because it's just too much of a hotbed. You would offend everybody. So, And I remember reading going oh, this just makes so much sense.
Yeah.
So
it's great that they embrace stuff like that and allow us to do that. Fallout, we've been very careful to stay true to the canon, which we're very good at with all our projects. And we have to work really hard to really stay on top of, the miniatures are true to what they would be in the game. But
that's the biggest difference between Star Trek and Fallout. Star Trek being a television show primarily, and Fallout being a video game. So it's another
and it's
game.
Very much only a video game. They don't really have much media in other areas. So it's, you have to be very careful not to paint the team into a corner. We can't just go, oh yeah, we've created this new vault that's in Boston.
Because the idea of role-playing a crew on the Enterprise is this unique, you get a chance to be an officer, whereas the ability to play a vault dweller, you get that in the video game. So the RPG is coming at it from a different philosophy and the game design, but it's still interactive media.
Yeah. I mean, they've been very good about letting us, we created a new gun that is a man-handled Gatling gun that isn't in the video game, but they were quite happy for us to have that as a little weapon option for fun because it makes sense for the miniatures game. And, so we've been able to do this kind of cool stuff, but there's so much actual content from the video game to create a miniature that we're going to be busy doing that without having to create anything new for quite a while. So
I'm looking around. So between Star Trek and Conan and John Carter and Fallout, you're getting a bit of a reputation for being the ones who do really good IP games.
Well, I hope so. We like to think that, everyone works very hard. And we were a small team. We're now 45 people, so we've expanded. So each game has got its own team that works on it, and Affinity's got a team, Conan's got a team.
It wasn't that long ago. Go back to the 90s, where if you saw a game that had an IP on it, that was a red flag. It was going to be cheap. It was going to be rushed. It was going to be just to grab money because, look, you recognize this logo and buy it.
Board games were traditionally awful with licenses. And, Decipher we're one of the first companies, not only, but they were one of the first to show that you could do a great licensed game. Star Wars was a fantastic licensed RPG with the the D6 system, and so they did a really good job, kind of bringing it through. Last Unicorn with Star Trek and stuff. Traditionally, in the 90s, there were some real turkeys of licensed RPGs, and sometimes when people were kind of
overwhelming as well. We've tried to play a few of them on the show, and they bury themselves in their own words and their own rules, and it's trying to compromise and work. And it's just like
I think also people were trying to dig to the bottom of the barrel to get a license.
Yeah, or just hacking a system that this wasn't intended for this game.
Yeah,
and then you got the license and you bootstrapped it onto the game.
Yeah.
And whereas yes, the 2D20 system predated the Star Trek game, but it still felt when I was playing it that this is very Trek.
Yeah, sure. I mean, one of my things was. I've had a lot of sci-fi RPGs where the starship rules are just so unwieldy that you never use them, so you end up kind of fudging it with like piloting roles and stuff. So it's like we've got to have a ship system that people actually want to play and use, and I think that's come through. And also we've made it more about the people, not about the tech or the world. Star Trek for me is very much about the characters, and I think we were able to bring characters really to the front of the gameplay. It's not about, the fact I've got a +3 phaser. Phasers are just a thing that everyone gets.
It's a post-scarcity environment. Let's not worry about the things. It was the talents. It was to use the determination points to be able to use your values. That was what it was. And you don't level up unless you actually have challenged or used or done something, interacted in any way with your value. So the game is intentionally
you
like
to play yourself.
Who are you? Challenge yourself. If you don't like that, go after it. And if you do like it, then use it. But it was just sort of. It was great, and it for us, it worked out really well.
Yeah, and every 2D20 game is a bit of an experiment for us because we're pushing the boundary of like, can we simplify this? Can we do this with it? It's a bit like a car company, I guess. They take that basic model, the engine and the chassis and the wheels, and go, okay, can we make this a sporty version? Can we make this a family SUV and it's going to be rugged and 4-wheel drive and really awesome, or can we make this a van? So we, every game, and we've got a couple more RPGs that are kind of announcing next year that are also 2D20, have gone in different directions, or we've, it's based on Infinity or it's based on Star Trek as a model, but we're pushing in a different direction to see how, you've got to make the game fit the story. It can't just be shoehorned in because we haven't got time. There's no point doing it then. So it's every new RPG we do is a kind of challenge to be like, okay, how can we make this really fun and come out the box? And
I think, among others, the work that Modiphious has done, if I see a game now with an IP, it's not an immediate it's okay, well let's peel back the curtain, let's see how it is, and it's built at least among myself a little bit more confidence, because I do like these properties, and it sucks when you pick up a game set in a world and it doesn't work. It's just it's even more of a letdown than playing some clunky other game. But to see it actually then realize and go there, great, now let's flex it out and try it, and it's just been that's all. That's my feedback. But
cool.
This isn't my interview. This is my interview with you, Chris. Here at GenCon, you've got the Alpha Quadrant book coming out. What do we got to look forward to? Any big stuff here that they want to know about when I put this podcast out?
Obviously Fallout. We've been showing off the Elder Scrolls miniatures for that game that's coming. We've got City of Mist, which is the kind of I described it as a bit of kind of American Gods, and it's this kind of superheroes in a kind of noir style city. That's really beautiful. It's just come out in retail.
It was something I mentioned when I was like, I wish I could have a setting where I could do Watchmen-y kind of thing. And I was like, it's
kind of along
this
that
might work out well with Watchmen coming back out on HBO. It might be really well timed.
Yeah. And we've got Liminal, which is this kind of Celtic, mythic thing set in modern day England that's just here. It's also in the Ennis as well tonight. We've got John Carter, which is our big range that's just come out in retail. That's been a kind of passion project for me because I loved it as a kid. And what else? We've Cult's just really come out in retail. We've also got Legacy, the little more digest size books, kind of post-apocalyptic stuff. And I've got a couple of really big, really exciting projects coming next year. Sort of anime, post-apocalyptic mecha game, which we're kind of just building up at the moment. We've got about 500 pieces of art. It's going to be a really exciting launch with storyline, sort of narrative fiction and audio dramas, and kind of building up to RPG and miniatures, and hopefully people are going to like it because we've spent a lot of time on it.
You're pressing the right buttons there with your teasing words, so I'll stay on top of that so that when we hear more information, I'll be there first in line.
Great.
Chris, thanks for spending time with me here on the floor. I've had a great time, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you very much. Yeah, cheers. Thanks.
Sam Webb, you're very welcome on the Terrible Warriors. Thanks for sticking some time with me.
No problem at all.
So I'm standing here literally in the corner of GenCon at your booth, and yesterday I got a great opportunity to sit down with Chris Birch, and we talked a lot about Star Trek and Fallout and where that's going and where that has been, and a lot of the miniatures aspect. But I did, want to pull you aside and what's your role here at Modiphious? And I understand you're the role-playing guy, if I want to talk about
I am the role-playing guy. Yeah. I have the lofty title of head of RPG development.
Wonderful. So we did a lot of Star Trek adventures during the Living campaign for the first season.
Yeah.
And got sucked into that. And we had a grand time. And then just today I've picked up the cult book because they were like all over the Ennies with their nominations, and I was like, "What is this thing?"
Yeah.
And I know John Carter from Mars is one that has been on my burner of this has to happen eventually.
Yeah.
So tell me here, Modiphious has had a hell of a year.
Yeah,
it has.
Like many years before, it's always been a hell of a year for us because we have a lot going on, even stuff that we haven't even really announced or talked about yet, and that I'm not going to talk about.
No.
Before you start. But we've had so many releases, even just this GenCon, that are kind of headliners for us and our fans, but not necessarily like huge news. We've had a lot of the Fallout Waste and Warfare stuff here, obviously, but then John Carter is one of the things that is new to GenCon from us. So it's been out for, I'd say, probably a couple of months now at least, and we fulfilled the Kickstarter, the wave one of that, so like the core products, the book, the campaign guide, the narrator's toolkit and all that kind of stuff.
So what can we expect there with John Carter from Mars? Is it runs on the same engine as Star Trek Adventures, or is it running on its own thing?
So
I know Chris was real passionate about that. That was like his thing that he grew up with, that story and that book. And this was like,
was
the thing of bringing that story. What could we expect when we open that book to take us into that world?
Really pulpy, like science romance, really. It uses the 2D20 system at its very core, but it was streamlined and made really pulpy in the development process. One of the things that I'm really proud of is that we don't just kind of reskin 2D20 and, slap a Starfleet designation on the front or like slap a Conan on the front. We actually go in and do a deep dive of the settings that we're working with and the universes. And make the mechanics fit that and make them really appropriate with the 2D20 core at its base.
And that felt really appropriate in Star Trek. Even with 2D20, the nature of it and the way you're combining attributes and skills and giving the players an opportunity to show off their own expertise. And I thought it was a system that really showed off expertise in a way that other systems don't always allow, because you're corralled into, I need a specific move for this specific challenge.
Yeah.
And Star Trek is all about, here's a problem. I don't have a solution for you. You do, because you're all
experts.
And the way the system is even if I don't actually have an answer, my character does. They know more about this than I do, and you can kind of play with that. It was wonderful. It felt really Trek. And yet it's this, the 2D20 system sounds like it's for you all quite versatile to modify
I think so.
Modular between different settings. So, anyway, that was just my 2 cents there. I just really like Star Trek, can you tell? So, but John Carter it's such a different setting from that. It's not an ensemble. How does it work when you're there with a group and a team? And because it's I don't know much about John Carter, to be honest, but I understand it's a singular hero.
It somewhat is, but the stories actually lend themselves to a little bit of troop play in some of the different kind of people and places people you can be and places you can come from like the kind of the green like four-armed Tharks to like Deja Thoris, this kind of amazing princess scientist, to like kind of like Okar Martians and the Firstborn Martians. So you can have lots of different kind of ancestry and different types of characters there, and it's all very heroic and like overly heroic. So you're talking like expertise in Star Trek. There's almost that kind of vibe in John Carter, but it's just that you are all incredibly capable people. It leans into that romantic novel aspect, you know. So it's much easier to like overcome like a room of minions and try to get to the like evil villain.
It's making me think a little bit of our experience when we did the Seventh Sea. It's got that romanticized Three Musketeers thing, but with this pulpy 30s era science fiction veneer.
That's it,
right? Yeah. All right. Cool. All right. I'm down. We've got a copy. We're just looking for that tease where we got into it. What are some of the other role playing? Like one of the things I was fascinated was you had the miniature set with Fallout, and the miniature set when we first talked to Chris years ago was. You could use it as a role-playing game.
Yeah.
The rules were there, but now it's been announced that Fallout is coming out with its own like tabletop core rule set. So, how did that come to be? Was it just that there was just so much of a demand with the miniatures to do that? Or
So there was a call out from the community of Wasteland Warfare players who were looking for a role-playing solution with the game. So that's why we brought out the standalone expansion book, and that works very well. And very intrinsically, obviously, based off the rule set for Wasteland Warfare. But we got the opportunity to make these role-playing games, and so I pitched for a 2D20, like its own proprietary, like, big hardbacks that we're used to, and it delves into the history and the setting of Fallout as well, that some of the standalone expansion here it touches on, but doesn't go into a huge amount of depth to. So we're developing that at the moment, and so hopefully next year we might be here with a full like Fallout role-playing game hardback.
Well, I'm looking forward to the sequel conversation that we have.
Yeah.
One of the things that Modiphious I think has received a well-deserved reputation of is handling IP properties and taking them and not cheapening the we're
really faithful with these.
Yeah, I think there was a time in the 90s especially where IP, if you saw a game that was based on a product, it was kind of a red flag already that it was something else that got that thing bootstrapped onto it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm just looking here at your pillars around us with Skyrim and with Conan, Fallout, Star Trek. But there's also original content that you have that isn't tied to an IP. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, so Chris started the company through a Kickstarter for AchTung Cthulhu, which was his own IP, kind of like a World War II Cthulhu setting, essentially, with strange occult Nazi factions and, allied heroes trying to fight the mythos. And so we have been updating it a bit as well and developing the actual IP a bit further in-house. And then bringing that in line to our 2D20 system. So there'll be a game for that out at some point in the not too distant future, which I think we should be kickstarting again, kind of bringing it to its roots again, So that's been really good to work on the development of that. And we streamed some of the beta testing on Encounter Roleplay as well, which was great fun to GM.
I see a lot of the artwork, all the cover work that comes out of AchTung. It just looks like a wild setting.
Yeah, it's phenomenal, and it's come like straight out of Chris's head. And now we've got the line editor on it is John Houlihan, who also contributed to some of the original fiction. A few years ago when it started up.
GenCon has such a Lovecraft presence. Almost every other booth has something of the mythos in there.
It's just something about it, right?
And taking the setting, though, and I've seen Cthulhu in ancient Rome, and I've seen Cthulhu with World War II, and taking that default setting of Massachusetts in the 1920s, but moving it to other places around the world. It's interesting and exciting, and it remixes these ideas we're used to. I also just saw there behind you, Infinity is a sci-fi RPG you have, right? Yeah,
another Kickstarter we did a couple of years ago, and we've just delivered the Wave 2 of that.
And that's a lot more than just the Star Trek Adventures game without the Star Trek IP, right?
Oh, yeah. In fact, it came before Star Trek Adventures, so the development and the design of the game was very much geared towards Infinity, obviously based off the tabletop skirmish game. So combat and, acting in, like, there's kind of Matrix-y type thing, so there's, like, InfoWar type stuff, and that's all very reactionary based as well, much like the tabletop skirmish game. So it's a bit more complicated than Star Trek Adventures because that's what the IP lent itself to. to, or lent us towards.
So it does have more crunch to get into it when you need to. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so does that mean the game's a little bit slower in spending time because of the planning that goes into what your strategy would be?
Yeah, absolutely can be. But again, it's still, a role-playing game at heart with characters who are just individually, but then for a collective, trying to strive towards a goal. So there's still our usual momentum and heat, or like threat as we usually kind of call it, in there. So you can riff off other people's successes. And at its very core, still uses, again, the 2D20 system that I think is really flexible for task resolution and for kind of cinematic role-playing.
It's a nice... It puts a lot of the agency into the player, I found, to propose their way through and navigate, rather than it just being on the GM. We do this, succeed, fail, succeed. But it's much more than... It's not as binary, I guess.
Yeah, I love the kind of mechanics like in Trek and in Infinity and other games like that, where you've got these like obtain information momentum spends, where you can just spend a point of momentum and then ask the GM a question. And it's like, I just want to know, like, do these things I'm seeing connect up somehow? And the GM can be really vague and stuff. Or they can just say, well, if they legitimately just wouldn't connect the dots, just be like, well, you don't know.
Which is nice for me when I'm running these games, is I can write a little extra detail. I don't have to feel like I have to find an excuse at some point to reveal it. Leave it to the players. You can draw this out of me, but and if you're not interested, you're not interested, and we'll just keep blowing stuff up. But.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it's great little kind of mechanical things like that just help along the kind of cinematic nature of what can be a role-playing game.
You can reward the player curiosity in a way that you might not otherwise see.
Yeah.
Is there any other thing here on your roster, like John Carter's the new one? Is there something that you feel like doesn't maybe get the love it deserves, gets overshadowed by all these huge names that you've got at your table? Because I also saw, like, I only just heard about Cult last night when I was standing in the Ennies, and it had been nominated for a number of like cover artwork and things like that. It looks so beautiful and evocative and weird and scary. And Liminal's another one that I see on the table. What can I know about these properties?
Well, so these are all like third-party properties that we work with, who are independent publishers.
Similar to the relationship with Free League, then.
Yeah, okay. And so we work with them to kind of get to the main kind of bricks and mortars market, so getting into retail, getting into distribution, and that kind of thing. So there's a whole host of IPs. There's some days where I go onto our web store just to have a look at something briefly, and I find a new IP that we're working with, or like a new publisher we're working with, and I'm like, what's this game? I have no idea. I've not been told about this. But it's really cool to discover, and it's really great for Chris to support these independent publishers. Like,
sure, cool and it must be, from a consumer standpoint, it all just seems Modiphious, and it's not always. And it took me a few goes at it to realize that Free League was like its own entity that was partnering with.
Yeah, and they flourish now, and they're going sticking out on their own. So it's doing so well. I'm being heckled by our community manager, who's here.
Wonderful. This is what happens when you're at a
when we're just on the floor. It's all good.
So, working with Modiphious, what are some of the things you have worked on in this last year that you and your stamp on it that you could talk directly about?
Oh, man. So in the Strange New Worlds supplement for Star Trek Adventures, which is our next adventure book, basically. So These Are the Voyages was our first one, and it had 8 standalone missions that you could just kind of throw into your campaigns, or you could just play through as part of a kind of longer running continuing voyages type thing. So in that second one, Strange New Worlds, I've got a mission. So I wrote a full 10,000 words mission that you can go on.
Terrific.
And so I'm really pleased with that. And
what should we know about this mission? What's the on the next episode of Star Trek teaser that we get?
Sure. The elevator pitch is that a Vulcan's Science Institute, I can't remember the exact name, but the Exploratory Science Division, has gone quiet on a planet. You warp into the system, and took some inspiration from real-life astronomical observations. And there is a planet out there that only reflects about 0.05% of all natural light in the spectrum. So it's basically a little black hole. But it's not a black hole, but it's literally like a visible like black thing.
Because this void.
Yeah, and so you warp into the system, and your scanners are on the fritz. So long-range sensors, short-range sensors aren't working too well because they're trying to scan this planet, and that one of the key things is that it's just literally covered in darkness. And that wasn't the designation it was given. The Vulcan science team down there weren't there to investigate that, so they've just gone dark, literally. So you've got to get down there, beam down there, and one of the overriding things about it is like not being able to see. So it's that kind of sensory deprivation thing about finding your way through a really troubling environment, because the premise of the book was all literally strange new worlds. So it was all...
Could you imagine making that into an episode on TV where it would just be sound?
Well, you could also kind of 2 feet in front of your face, so it's all like EV suits, lights are on, but you can only it's really misty. You can only see
claustrophobic.
Exactly, right? Yeah. So one of the, like you say about flexibility for 2D20, one of the cool things about that is like the trait system, or like kind of the truths thing in our games, where it's basically kind of like mechanizing a little bit of the environment. So it's basically like saying, okay, well, actually, when you're on the surface here, you've got this trait called darkness 2. Which means that things that are gonna, like the darkness is going to inhibit, is going to be, the difficulty is going to increase by 2 for your tasks and stuff. So that was really cool because you just lean on that all the time. So like, well, if you're trying to see something, might be actually be impossible, or it might be like the difficulty for searching for something will increase by 2. Yeah. Or like you say, if there becomes a point where actually it becomes stressful to be there because you can't see anything. Even your own teammates and your tricorders aren't working properly. So you just get lost. There's no landmarks. There's nothing to see. Yeah. So even like your mental capacity and or faculties will struggle, and so that will make those tasks harder. So that was really cool to lean on. And
I'm very excited to visit the Silent Planet.
Here
we are.
Yeah.
Sam, thank you so much for spending time with me here at the booth. It's been a very busy weekend. I do appreciate the time you had. Before I leave, is there where can we find you if we wanted to follow what Sam Webb is up to, as well as with Modiphious?
Yeah. So I'm around the internet at RPG Webby. I like Reddit, Twitter, and Twitch as well. We stream. I stream fairly regularly on a Thursday evening at UK time. We're playing a Game of Thrones game at the moment, a big campaign that the whole gang's just fallen in love with. So we're carrying that on for a while. It's basically like Brexit the musical, but set in Westeros. It's all a bit horrible and
yay!
Yeah, bit of art reflecting the kind of current situation. And
it sounds cathartic.
That's the one I was looking for. So it's quite cathartic that way. And then I'm streaming a bit on other channels too. And then I've got a Kickstarter going on at the moment, the Spy game, which I'm independently publishing. So if you're on Kickstarter the next few days, then look for the Spy game, and we should come up straight away.
If this comes out afterwards, I'll put the link into it anyway, so you can send kudos.
Yeah, no worries. So I'm looking forward to that finishing up and seeing how that does.
All right, Sam, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your GenCon.
No problem. Thank you. You too.
Special thanks again to Modiphious for spending their time with us, and to Aaron Pollyea, Chris, Birch, and Sam Webb in particular. Be sure to check out those show notes to find out where you can follow them and the projects that they are working on. Terrible Warriors is only possible because of the support from fans like you who go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/terriblewarriors. They get some souvenirs sent to them in the mail. They get access to exclusive debrief episodes when we're in our regular season, as well as higher up that ladder, you can join in with private games that we run every month. This month, there is still time for you to sign up and join in our game of Zombie World by Magpie Games. Follow us on Twitter at Dice Warriors. We're also on Instagram when we remember that is a thing. And next week on the Terrible Warriors, we stay at GenCon a little bit longer to speak to Matthew Orr, the creator of an independent success story. He's the founder of Wet Ink Games, and his game, Never Going Home. Well, I had to talk to him based on the artwork alone, and you'll find out more next week, right here on the Terrible Warriors.